So if there existed a solved metagame in Pokemon, you would probably expect it to be Gen 1 OU. Considering those games were in development when we still had leaded gasoline. Yeah, Gen 1 players have generally had enough time to figure out that the good Pokemon are the ones with numbers that look like this, and not the ones where the numbers, they look like this. And yeah, it's probably the only generation where you can go to the viability rankings and just take the first 6 Pokemon and have all the tools you need to succeed. But at the same time, it's also probably the only generation that has, like, fucking lines of play.
Oh my god. Enhance 17 through 23. Hand clap. Twirl. Toe tap. Double boot slap. He's executing every move exactly like everyone else, like no one I've ever seen. He's on fire!
So any slight deviation from the formula can give you a significant advantage, and make your opponent question their optimal resource management. Look, all I'm saying is that when you've been together for a couple of decades, maybe it's time to add some new partners. I don't know. Maybe Poliwrath sucks toes. So how did we get the modern OU list anyway? Well, the super old generations on Smoggin are kind of an anomaly, because they were never actually tiered based off of usage per se, but strictly community opinion. The tiers have also never been frozen, and despite the fact that Smoggin has been around for so long that it's like a website, they were not the first plug in town.
But Black Dynamite! I sell
tiers
to the community.
So at various points throughout this game's convoluted fucking history, not just Smoggin, but communities like RBY 2K10 and Pokemon Perfect have had their own evolving OU lists that were in fact not always these exact 13 Pokemon. So if you're looking to spice up your ladder experience, but you still want to use Pokemon that have, like, roles on a team, these OU Washups are probably a pretty good place to start.
Hey there, Washup! Looks like nobody cares about you.
Lapras was OU for about a decade and a half, and is in fact still the highest ranked Pokemon in OU that isn't actually an OU Pokemon. Its appeal is pretty obvious. It learns pretty much every good special move in the game, and it has more numbers than Snorlax. Lapras is actually one of the anointed ones who can almost consistently duel Snorlax as well as Tauros 1v1, thanks to its stat line and stab on the notoriously stacked Gen 1 Blizzard. And maybe a 10% chance to kill the opponent instantly isn't good enough for you. Big fucking surprise there. Well, with Sing, you can actually goose those odds up to better than a coin flip. You probably don't want to actually click Sing with Lapras like ever, though, because this ain't chancy. If you miss one, you basically just blew your whole team slot. Lapras is like the 1v1 master, but it does need pretty much full HP to actually win any interaction. This also means you can't really take advantage of its bulk and switch it into anything other than like an unstab Ice Beam, or its stocks go down dramatically. Lapras also doesn't love that Cloyster is also a Water Ice type, and also checks Snorlax and Tauros, and also has a humongo base stat total. But Lapras does have one notable advantage over Cloyster, and that is that Lapras is
a f***ing plesiosaur.
Naturally, the other big bombastic Blizzard bot in Gen 1 is Articuno. Throughout the history of RBY, Articuno has at times been seen as too good for UU, and even briefly OU, basically entirely because of one move and one number. Articuno is a really good Pokemon to use if your mom didn't quit smoking when she was pregnant with you. You just click the button. And if they have a Cloyster or a Lapras, you click this button instead and find a new game. As of the recording of this video, Hypno is one of 2 borderline banditos along with Lapras. It's actually pretty impressive that Hypno got banned from UU considering that Sleep was already banned there in general. And it turns out Hypno actually was OU for about 2 months 20 years ago.
I'm Brother Reynolds, class of 98.
Plague Von Karma has a really good video about this. Oh wow, oh gosh, how did this get here? Purely by virtue of being a reasonably bulky psychic type that can kill the opponent in one hit, Hypno probably can help you win some games in OU. It's just like, fucking, why? Hypno basically consolidates every psychic type better than it into one team slot, as well as all of their recessive genes. Gen 1 Hypno is actually like the most pretty good Pokemon of all time. This man can do it all. It can be the world's crappiest Alakazam, with no speed and no recover, but the worst, best move in the game. Or it can be the world's crappiest Exeggutor, with no explosion but also no ice weakness, and the worst, best move in the game. Or you can actually play to its strengths, and it can be by far the best Pokemon in the game at stacking Thunderwave debuffs with Meditate, and using boosted Headbutt to Paraflinch something, and using Submission on Chansey, and dying to the recoil, so that Chansey can't take an action that turn, and can't use Soft Boiled. That is like the Sicilian defense of Gen 1 OU. Hypno actually is kind of a meta call against lead Exeggutor due to being just faster enough than it, and still being able to spread dual status. The problem is, Exeggutor is like not even the 6th most likely lead you're going to see, and also you could just be using Jinx. Hypno does actually have a useful function in Ubers though.
Oh my god, he said it.
Where its combination of above average bulk, Thunder Wave, counter, and hypnosis lets it effectively counter lead Tauros. So I guess that also makes it a good OU meta call against 1012 ELO ladder players. RBY Persian is pretty famous as the Pokemon that is the most almost as good as Tauros.
Get me Tauros!
He's unavailable.
Then get me his non-Union Mexican equivalent!
It clicks normal moves and revenge kills about 80% as good as the big man on campus. And it turns out using 1.5 Tauroses is still better than using 1 Tauros and one of like 90% of Pokemon in the game. Persian Slash is also some easy serotonin if you're tired of seeing Reflect Snorlax sleeping on the fucking job. Unfortunately, while you'd think it would be a pretty easy game plan, where you just click the normal moves for half the game, you actually have to play so conservatively, because now a third of your team doesn't want to switch into literally any Pokemon or take a Thunder Wave without kneecapping your endgame. Also, it just kinda doesn't feel great when you send out Tauros and it just crits its move like half the time anyway.
I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. Take my 75% chance of winning. If we used to go one-on-one and then add 66 and 2/3%, I got 141 and 2/3 chance of winning at sacrifice.
And if you want a real success story, Dragonite started from the bottom with nothing but an incredible move pool and the second highest base stat total in the game, and was able to work its way all the way up to the bottom of C rank. But why would anyone want to use a Pokemon with no stab moves and a 4x weakness to an attack that you can reasonably expect to see on like half of your opponent's team?
Rap, 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 rap.
course, Dragonite isn't the only hot new rapper out of Kanto. Victory Bell uses the same paralysis plus wrap strategy on a much less impressive body, but does sweeten the pot with sleep powder and an actual stab move. Victory Bell is one of those Pokemon that you'll run into on the ladder, and it will beat you so bad that you have to, like, go outside and look at some birds, and then you try to use it, and it's like it has a fucking cold. Victory Bell is really just an insane matchup fish against slower teams that have a Thunder Wave lead and then, like, Rhydon and Slowbro or Exeggutor. Because if you can paralyze that Thunder Wave lead, Victory Bell is now faster than every Pokemon except the protagonist, and can proceed to Sleep Powder the Chansey or Exeggutor, delete Rhydon and paralyzed Starmie with Razor Leaf, and wrap everything else to death. A strategy which is guaranteed to command the respect and admiration of your colleagues.
Make any friends?
Not really.
However, Victory Bell is still firmly a fringe pick because now players tend to try to get their Chansey paralyzed instead of their fast Psychic type. And also because all of Victory Bell's moves are fucking 70 fucking accuracy. Drinking again, Victory Bell? Get it together. You have to pick up your son from soccer practice today. And of course, the most iconic Gen 1 OU washup has to be Golem. OU for 2 decades, now almost as consistent as Porygon. Golem has probably the most interesting competitive history of any Pokemon in RBY, and I am not at all qualified to talk about it. So I have asked Plague Von Karma, the person who knows more words about Golem than anyone on the planet, to come say a few of them, because I only know the one word about Golem, and it's this one. So you've got a substitute teacher today. I'm gonna go day drink in the teacher's lounge. And you better turn on your fucking listening ears, okay?
Hello! I'm Plague Von Karma, here to crash Reverend's party. Golem is a very misunderstood Pokemon that has been through a lot of shifts in opinion over the past 5 years. Simply put, if you try to use it like Rhydon, it will invariably lose. Golem doesn't have the same attack stat that Rhydon has, so it can't hit numerous valuable KO ranges that define Rhydon as a Pokemon. When not riding its coattails, Golem is simply an exploding Zapdos counter that can beat Rhydon one-on-one. Its dream is to absorb a Hyper Beam or Explosion, counter Zapdos, and then scream, "For the motherland!" before exploding. All of this makes placing Golem on teams very, very difficult, as they need to have a bad Rhydon matchup and a need for an explosion beyond Snorlax to self-destruct. However, this isn't to say that Mono Golem is unusable. The most competitively relevant example of a Golem team since its fall from grace in 2018 is Amaranth's Golmalt team. The aim of this team is to land Sing on Starmie, sack Chansey to sleep, and then use Golem and Snorlax's nuclear explosions to boost the tempo of the game until Moltres is poised to win. If you want more information, I recently put out a literal movie about Golem's competitive history in Generation 1. By all means, check it out after you finish this video.
Pretty cool. I like the part of the movie where Golem uses explosion.
Are you willing to sacrifice your life?
Seriously, PVK helped me out a lot with this video, and she is like the reason why the RBY resources are the only part of Smogon that doesn't feel like a dying mall. Please watch this video, it's fucking incredible. But not now. Because Golem is certainly not the only silver metal Pokemon you can get away with in OU. With only about 80 fully evolved Pokemon in the entire game, you would think that maybe half of them wouldn't just be a worse version of something else, with just like an extra pinch of chili powder.
No, Chili Pea's my signature.
But the really lucky ones at least get to be a worse version of a Pokemon that you're already guaranteed to be using. Because really, why not also use the second best?
And 12 half gallons of Tennessee's second finest discount sipping
Toros.
That's right.
Everyone knows that Persian is the best bootleg Tauros in RBY, but Kanto actually has more discount bulls than a cattle auction that's in a bad neighborhood. I don't know, they can't all be zingers. Dodrio is like the most epic Pokemon of all time because it has Snorlax's Hyper Beam on a speed stat. Dodrio is actually on that Uber's Tauros type beat because it is a really good lead to use if you really hate Jinx, but don't care that much about, like, winning. If they leave Jinx in, Dodrio has a better than not chance of OHKOing with Hyper Beam, factoring in crits and accuracy. And if they do anything else, then you... Looking at Kangaskhan, you might think that it's just another bad Tauros, but think again, asshole. Because it's actually a bad Snorlax. Kangaskhan is a mid-game progress maker with counter and more physical bulk than Tauros, which means that it actually helps take a lot of the anxiety out of making Sophie's choice of which of your Pokemon to switch into random body slams. Just make sure your opponent doesn't find out that Kangaskhan has the same special as Ekans, and that it's actually optimal for Tauros to use Blizzard. But if Kangaskhan is actually hitting Mega Kicks and two-shotting Chansey and Starmie and countering Hyper Beams, then yeah, this Pokemon is like a nice, cheap wine. And if it's not, then it's like a non-alcoholic IPA. And if Dodrio is a bad Tauros and Kangaskhan is a bad Snorlax, then Raticate is like a little fucking asshole. Super Fang stocks are definitely the highest they've ever been in Generation 1, where stat XP gives everything max bulk, and Rhydon is out here doing like 17% to Reflect Lax. Super Fang also hits Gengar in this generation, BT dubs. Pretty cool. And of course, Super Fang into Hyper Beam is a certified gamer combo, and I think I'd kind of love Raticate, honestly. You know, a good thing about being a top 17 Smogtuber is that I can say Raticate is good and people might believe me. Anyway, Raticate's pretty great. Aerodactyl might go for the throat, but Raticate goes for the fucking eyes. And you can even round out a whole little big 3 with low-tier normal types, because Porygon is like a crappy Chansey, right?
It's true, but he shouldn't say it.
Porygon is a normal type with a recovery move that is faster than Snorlax and has Bolt Beam coverage plus Thunder Wave. Behold, a Chansey. Of course, where Porygon carves out its niche is that it takes physical hits about, like, 3% better than Chansey, and also its recovery move has this many numbers, which is more than Chansey has, and more than Snorlax has body slams. So you can switch into it, and you can click the button 24 times. And it's great, and it gets the people fucking going.
It's the most fun you can possibly have.
And of course, women love me because they all know Amistar. Amistar is another one of those Pokemon that just sits on Reflect Lax so that you can use a moveset on your own Snorlax that actually sparks joy. Of all the Pokemon that kind of beat some Snorlaxes, Amistar is definitely one of them. Compared to Aerodactyl, Amistar can't take Earthquakes, but it can take Ice Beams, and it can actually rest loop Amnesia Snorlax if they're using Ice Beam instead of Blizzard for some reason. And then compared to Porygon and Cloyster, Amistar can threaten to just straight up 3-hit KO Snorlax with Hydro Pump. And it all sounds pretty poggies, but this feels like one of those Pokemon that's just body slamming Starmies all day. I really hope I can find an SPL replay of someone using Amistar, because I do not want to use this on ladder, because it sounds so boring. I'm sorry, some things just aren't worth dying for. One of the main weaknesses of rap teams is that your opponent still gets to have a pretty good time for at least like 40% of the game, but if you're already using Dragonite and Victory Bell, I'm sure you can find room for Arbok too. And the Gamer Police can't even bust down your door for it, because not only is Arbok the third best Pokemon in the game that learns Paralysis and Partial Trapping moves, but it also has the rare ability to actually fucking hit Gengar. Yeah, Dragonite doesn't learn Earthquake in Gen 1. Fucking brutal. And while you're at the Snake store, might as well pick up an Onix too. Onix actually has kind of insane roll compression on rap teams because it consolidates the roles of Partial Trapper, Zapdos counter, Exploder, and guy that's fucking really fucking big. And hey, now you're working with a whole rap crew. These chicks don't even know the name of my bind. Was that anything? Anyway, I'm tired of talking about the Pokemon that kind of suck in ways that I'm well acquainted with. Where are the Pokemon that kind of suck in new and proprietary ways?
We need some more secret sauce! Put this mayonnaise in the sun!
Machamp is a Pokemon that has whatever the opposite of je ne sais quoi is. It fits onto the same paralysis spam structures that you would normally use Rhydon on if you decide that what you want instead is a Pokemon that doesn't resist anything and can't two-shot star me. All just to chase the dopamine rush of seeing the words "it's super effective" below the triumvirate. And honestly, that's chasing waterfalls. Realistically, what you're getting is the dopamine rush of double switching into Chansey, and then the crushing realization that you're just going to have to click fucking Body Slam anyway because they're just going to switch into any psychic type. I think Machamp might have lied on its resume. It says here that it's a fighting type with 130 base attack and the 3 best Pokemon are normal types, but it sure doesn't feel like it actually beats any of them. Unless you like double switch into them and they're already paralyzed and they just went through a difficult divorce. I feel like I'm really coming at Machamp right now. At the end of the day, Machamp is one of like 2 Pokemon that can two-shot Snorlax without crits, and it's also probably the best Pokemon in the game at countering your own explosion damage. Because people love to bring in the blind Snorlax or Chansey after you clear the field, and then switch into a Psychic type when they see Machamp. I'm pretty sure this is the most efficient way available to get your opponent to spend a minute desperately Googling something. Clefable is a Pokemon that's notable for being the sweetest bean. Before Clefable just got better every generation for 20 years, it had to start somewhere, and in RBY, it's kind of just relegated to being like the 4th best Pokemon at every single task. Clefable learns more moves that do something when you click them than just about any other Pokemon in the game. And between Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Thunder Wave, Sing, and Stab normal moves, Clefable is so good at almost trading with something. But Clefable's best feature is that it has probably the best back sprite in the game. Seriously, this shit has like parallax. This is kind of incredible. And Nidoking is pretty cool because it's like the platonic ideal of a creature. It's kind of like Rhydon if it just molted and the carapace hasn't hardened yet. Nidoking doesn't hit the big gamer numbers that Rhydon does, but its Earthquake does still do more damage to neutral targets than a Snorlax Body Slam. And Nidoking actually has both a speed and a special stat. notably outrunning Cloyster, who can only really switch in once because Earthquake and 2 Thunderbolts will kill it, and Blizzard usually 3-shots Exeggutor. Pretty good stuff. I like Nidoking. Nidoking is a very no-nonsense Pokemon, but that is not something that gets you very far in RBY. So if what you want is a Pokemon that's all nonsense, Moltres is a Pokemon you use if you're looking for a matchup spread that's maybe 5% better than Articuno's, but you trade a 10% chance to kill Starmie instantly with your main stab move for a 30% chance to make Starmie fucking unkillable. The burn chance on Fire Blast does arguably give Moltres an even better matchup against Tauros and Snorlax, and 90% of the time it is Mr. Button Clicker Jones, but with the option of Agility and Fire Spin in its pocket if you think you can get away with just fucking robbing somebody. But do remember that Moltres is like the anti-Tauros. Tauros can win from any position, and Moltres can lose from any position. Yeah, Moltres, I get it. The Adderall shortage has been hard on all of us. I also think Wheezing is pretty underrated. You can switch into Tauros and explode. It's like if Golem was even worse. And that's pretty good. Oh my god, there are like so many more of these. Anyway, I'm gonna go do ketamine in the supply closet.
Hello again! Reverend wants me to talk about some of my pet Pokemon now. Firstly, I want to talk about Gyarados. Back in the day, this Pokemon was actually pretty good, but it's never quite managed to cut it and overused, mainly due to a quadruple weakness to Electric, making it food for Starmie and Bolt Beam Chansey. Personally though, I think it's really underrated, and the Chinese community agrees. Shoutouts to Torchic and Unknown Dragon for pushing this old titan. Gyarados is sort of a middle ground between Starmie and Lapras, possessing incredible bulk that allows it to survive Thunderbolts from either. Plus, its Hydro Pulp reaches some insane damage thresholds, 3 echoing Snorlax, 2 echoing Tauros, and more. The Tauros matchup is particularly interesting, as it dodges Earthquake, giving it not only a point of entry, but also the potential to blow past it right after, something that very few Pokemon can do. This ground immunity also lets Gyarados bully Rhydon when it's trying to swing for the KO, but be careful of Rock Slide, it really hurts. One thing that makes me like to use it over Lapras is that it outruns Cloyster or Dragonite, and has a decent shot at beating weakened Chansey. Just don't use it against Reflect builds, that kinda sucks. Here are 2 teams I've put Gyarados on in the past. The first is a team I did for an RMT on Smogon, and the second is something I built more recently. You'll notice that I use it alongside Jolteon in both cases. Jolteon is another Pokemon that's pretty solid at keeping the opponent off Tauros, being faster and having Thunderwave access, and its Rhydon problem can be sort of solved with Gyarados' highly specific traits. Combine this with Jolteon's own late game cleaning abilities and anti-Chansey traits, and you have a perfect partner for Gyarados. Next up, Venusaur. Zokaru taught me a bit about how to use this Pokemon in 2021, and ever since then, I've slowly begun to think this frog monster is kind of cracked. No, really, I actually think this Pokemon could take tournament sets, it's really interesting. So lots of people immediately draw comparisons between Venusaur and Victreebel, but sort of like Rhydon and Golem, using them in the same way is actively self-sabotage. Victreebel is firmly identified as a rapper, being best placed on offensive teams that want to choke the opponent out, but its bulk is terrible and it despises paralysis, which makes setting up Swords Dance very difficult. If you want to use Swords Dance, Venusaur is often the better choice, as it can safely set up at least one Swords Dance against most physical attackers of the tier, most notably Snorlax and Rhydon. Even Tauros can't KO Venusaur with Body Slam plus Hyper Beam, it needs to use 2 Body Slams, while with Victreebel it's a roll for a 2 KO, although a bit unlikely. Plus, being fully committed to Swords Dance makes Venusaur a little less afraid of paralysis, being able to comfortably set it up to reapply the paralysis speed drop of opposing Pokemon to keep the momentum going. Natively outrunning Cloyster and Exeggutor is also very nice for Sleep Powder. Victreebel only speed ties Cloyster, and if it loses the speed tie and misses, it just kind of dies. In general, Venusaur is more consistent, which is extremely important for a setup build, because you're spending a turn doing nothing in hopes of a big reward later. Reflect Snorlax builds have a shocking amount of trouble against Venusaur. Razor Leaf, much like Persian's Slash, will force it to spam Rest if it wants to stay in, and this entire time, Venusaur can sneak into Swords Dance during rest turns. Eventually, it boosts so much that 2 Razor Leafs followed by Hyper Beam are enough for it to blow past. This makes it an extremely convincing way to bring down the bear, and once it's done, it's still got a +6 Hyper Beam to OHKO most Pokemon of a tier with. In a similar fashion, this makes Venusaur a very threatening sleeper, as there's no way you can stay in against it once it gets Sleep Powder off. Every instance you stay in to burn sleep turns is a chance for Swords Dance, and even one is enough for the game to be flipped on its head. It's impossible to OHKO Venusaur outside of extreme edge cases, and once it lands a hit post Sleep Powder, something is going down, meaning it's gone 2 for 1. This isn't to say Venusaur is without flaws though. It's weak to Blizzard and Psychic, which makes it extremely weak to Pokemon like Alakazam, Starmie, and Exeggutor once Sleep is up. And it does rely on setup to get much going against the big cheeses of OU. While it is more consistent than Victory Bell, this really isn't a high bar. It's called Chokeshoe Bell in the community for a reason. Regardless, my opinions on Venusaur are quite positive. Also, fun fact, did you know the back sprite is meant to represent Venusaur angling the Rafflesia at the opponent, being a remnant of its old design for Pokemon Red and Green? Weird, huh?
You know, for as technically not outclassed as Venusaur is, it's kind of wild how many Pokemon are, like, exactly as good as it.
Swords.
Swords Dance is kind of confounding in Generation 1. It's really appealing if Reflectlax has been snoozing on you all day, and it synergizes with the famously badass Gen 1 Hyper Beam. And they even gave it to all these Pokemon, and none of them are better than Victory Bell. And Victory Bell's the worst fucking Pokemon in the game. Like Plague Von Karma said, Victory Bell never actually wants to use Swords Dance, because it's outclassed at it by Venusaur, and even if it wasn't, it would be giving up one of the unique tools that gives it a niche in the first place. So the best Pokemon that learns Swords Dance and actually wants to use it is probably Sandslash. Sandslash's good things about it are that it is immune to Thunder Wave, and it has an actual physical stab, and it is a Zapdos and Jolteon contingency even if you don't get the clip, and it's also just a little critter. Sandslash's Earthquake is weaker than the Hyper Beam on most of the other viable Swords Dancers, but just having Earthquake is definitely worth it, considering that every other Swords Dancer is kind of defined by just how cucked it gets by Gengar. It also means Sandslash can go 1v1 with Golem and Rhydon. Sandslash is also the slowest viable Swords Dancer, but the Thunder Wave immunity definitely helps to mitigate that. And the speed tiers in Gen 1 OU are kind of like a reverse bell curve anyway. So just being faster than Exeggutor is like, whoa, fucking slow down there, Mario Andretti. Kabutops is another Swords Dancer that can never hold its child. Kabutops' special tricks and treats are that it has a big stupid slash it can throw out if you don't have a setup opportunity yet, which can also be used to finesse Swords Dance opportunities against Reflectlax, similar to Venusaur. Except Kabutops actually resists normal moves and Ice Beam. Water Rock is kind of the god typing in Gen 1, so even if you don't have a good Swords Dance matchup, Kabutops is still a useful goon to switch into random Hyper Beams and explosions and ice moves. And it also has Stab Surf for a consistent way to deal with Rhydon.
Gotta be kidding me.
It is also worth noting that RBY has a unique Kabutops form. Nowadays, Kabutops has this little dongle going on back here, but in RBY, they gave it a circumcision. Kingler is by far the most badass goddamn Pokemon in the whole fucking shit, because it learns a move that is called Crab Hammer. Kingler's Crab Hammer is about halfway between Starmie Surf and Amistar Hydro Pump in terms of damage, and gives Kingler a tool that can chunk Gengar on the switch and is also usually a 3-hit KO against Snorlax. And it also means that Kingler pairs really well with Pokemon like Zapdos, because you can bring Kingler in on the Rhydon switch and then either force it out for a high IQ setup opportunity, or just straight up fucking obliterate it with Crab Hammer. if for some reason you think you're more likely to win with Zapdos than with Kingler. But the real reason you're using Kingler is because it has the highest attack stat of any Swords Dancer, which means that at +2, it is the only one that will always one-shot full health Chansey. Oh my god. The most beautiful combination of words in the English language. Of course, this means that you will also always one-shot it at +0, as long as you pledge your allegiance to the Dark Lord. Hail Satan! And Pinsir's Tinder bio are that it has the second highest attack of any Swords Dancer, which means that it will still usually one-shot full health Chansey, while also having an even juicier slash than Kabutops, which can sometimes just 3-shot Snorlax. Sometimes. And it also has Bind, which can theoretically 32-shot any Pokemon in the game. Any of them except for this thing. Yeah, Pinsir has a move pool like dry ramen. Pinsir can try to tango with Rhydon at +2 with Submission, if you think you can actually hit 2 of them, and that they don't just have fucking Rock Slide anyway. But against Gengar, the best thing Pinsir can do is Seismic Toss it. And using Seismic Toss on Pinsir just to hit Gengar is like smoking stems and seeds to get high, when the keyboard cleaner is right over there.
No need to mess around with crushed bugs.
And that about does it for the Swords Dancers that you could reasonably convince your parole officer are respectable associates. But there is one more that I want to talk about, and truthfully, this one is just for me. And it's fucking Lickitung, baby. Fuck yeah. Yeah, no one in the world gives a shit about this Pokemon except for me. It's like a cryptid in its own game. So Lickitung is kind of like if Pinsir actually learned all the moves it wanted to, and was also addicted to Xanax. Lickitung has Swords Dance, Stab Hyper Beam, Earthquake, Wrap, Bolt Beam coverage, and the same base stat total as Nidorino. However, since it has this big juicy dump stat right here, it means the rest of those numbers are distributed just well enough for Lickitung to be one of the best Pokemon at actually clicking the move Swords Dance, considering that it's immune to Body Slam paralysis, can survive a Body Slam plus a Hyper Beam from Snorlax, and will always survive a crit Alakazam Psychic at full HP. And since Lickitung is actually a normal type, like all the other Swords Dancers wish they were, it means that Lickitung is theoretically the most powerful wall breaker in Generation 1. So getting Stab means that Lickitung's Hyper Beam starts out about as strong as Scyther's, and while every other Swords Dancer is going to hit the 999 stat cap eventually anyway, Lickitung can effectively exceed that limit due to actually getting a stab boost at the end. This means that at +6, Lickitung is the only one that can one-shot Snorlax, Slowbro, and Cloyster, while also having Earthquake to whoop Rhydon and Gengar.
We dreamed of creating the world's strongest Pokemon, and we succeeded.
Of course, Farfetch'd can claim the same numbers on its Hyper Beam, while even being faster than fucking Snorlax. Or at least it would be able to, if Farfetch'd actually learned Hyper Beam. Jesus Christ. Anyway, Swords Dance tends to be overshadowed by another setup move in Generation 1, because that one is way more stacked, and they even gave it to a couple of Pokemon that are actually good. And I'm not even talking about this one, because let me ask you, how many times has Slowbro let you down in this game? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now tell me this, how many times has Golduck let you down? Yeah, I think Golduck might be the best Pokemon in this whole fucking game. How many times has Poliwrath let you down?